Hello everyone. I thought I would take a break here and do a video of the engine compartment of my Jaguar Series 1 E-Type manufactured on January 2nd, 1963. And I'm going to do the engine compartment before things start to get hidden behind other things. So here we go in no particular order. Discussion of where some key elements of the engine compartment are. Of course, the centerpiece of the engine is the dual overhead cam straight six XK engine. That architecture was developed around World War II and continued on into, Series 3 XJ6, I believe. Anyway, it was a very durable design. It is 6 cylinders in a row, straight six. The dual overhead cams. So the shiny cover you see in the foreground is for the intake camshaft, and the one in the background is for the exhaust camshaft. That part of the engine, of course, will be visible when the car is complete, but I'm going to go into a few things that tend to get a little bit obscured as you build the engine and assemble everything. First of all, there are no carburetors mounted, and we have ultimately 3 SU carburetors will mount to these manifolds. You'll be able to see that each single mounting point for the carburetor bifurcates into 2 inlet passages for the 2 rearmost cylinders. This is a cross-flow engine, which simply means that the air goes in one side and the exhaust comes out the other side. A less desirable design is one where everything's on one side of the engine. So we have the sand cast intake manifolds that are bolted to the side of the cylinder head. 3 of those guys. This lower pipe, which has been polished, is simply an air balance tube. It provides an air passage between the 3 intakes and balances the air. A rubber hose will connect at the outlet here, and amongst other things, that will feed vacuum to the vacuum reservoir tank, which I have applied the original applique for the Trico Reservac. This manifold is part of the water passage, and it does take water out of the cylinder heads, and also there'll be a hose that goes from the back here over to a connection on the firewall, and eventually it'll make its way over to the heater on the other side. On the front here we have the radiator shroud, the overflow tank, I guess, for lack of a better word, and in the distance there is your stone shield. Here's the water pump. There's a rubber hose and then a plastic tube or metal pipe. Sorry, metal pipe. No plastic on this engine. That goes back here, and that returns the water from the heater. Here on the firewall is the motor for the wipers, and the washer, when I install, it'll mount right here. These are 3 blanking plates. The engine chassis, the cockpit was symmetrical, so on a right-hand drive car, these openings would be occupied, and when we get to the other side, we'll see what they're occupied with. Here's a little fuel filter, and it ultimately will plumb in to the carburetors. And this cable that I haven't connected up yet, but disappears right there, is going to be the choke cable. There's a starter buried down in there. Starter's held in with 2 bolts. If you're fortunate, you can get at the front and somebody's done something to allow you to hold the rear. The top one is not too bad. The bottom one requires some creativity. I made some little nut plates to keep the rear from turning, but that probably only works if the bolts are not rusty. If they're rusty, you're going to have a real socket on them. Pretty obscure little item, but right in here is a stabilizer bracket. It comes out at the top. And this is the rev generator that's just basically a little AC motor that generates an AC signal, AC generator that generates an AC signal to the tachometer, and it runs off the end of the camshaft. Right down in there is the oil it's the oil filter. And then in this block right here is the oil pressure unit sending gauge. And also underneath it is the oil pressure relief valve. And let's see, as far as the things that you're not going to be able to see very well later, of course, there'll be shrouds put around a lot of this. There's the underside of the oil filter. If there's a need for the oil to, if it's overpressure, it'll feed back to the sump through this tube right here. And in my other video, I discussed the torsion bars. Probably will come back to suspension. I haven't completed the suspension. I do have the brake lines plumbed in, ready to go. And the wiring harness is loosely installed, as you can see. So just one point of interest, there is a heavy cable that goes from the starter, and it wraps all the way around the front of the engine and comes out on the other side, and we'll see that. Yeah, just by the way, terminology, this is your engine frame. It attaches to the firewall at 1, 2, 3, 4 places. And then it comes forward and provides a spot for the motor mounts. And then at its front edge, it attaches to what we call the picture frame, which is just a rectangular unit. And then attached forward to that is the bonnet support frame. These are the balance links. So the bonnet is spring loaded in the sense that it'll hold itself up, and then the balance links provide a little tension as you lower it. But if you hear somebody talk about balance links, that's what they're talking about. These would have been cadmium plated with black springs from the factory. Here's one end of the sway bar, and here's one end of the steering rack. We're around on the driver's side now. On these 3.8 cars, there's a 3-way union here. Actually, it's a 4-way union, and the 4th plug is for the pressure switch that turns your stop lights on when you step on the brake pedal. And so if you get a pressure here, it activates that system. This is a generator car, so it has a generator. Nothing fancy there. There are only 2 connections to the wiring of the generator. And as we move forward to the rear, here is the brake fluid bottles, and the clutch fluid bottles with the asbestos-based, no longer, but originally asbestos-based heat shield. On a right-hand drive car, all this would have been on the other side, but when they moved for left-hand drive cars, the exhaust came right out next to the brake bottles, and I think they were boiling the brake fluid, so they put in that shield. I do not have the exhaust manifolds attached. We're talking about a cross-flow engine. Each cylinder, of course, gets its exhaust port, but They are a 3-into-1 arrangement. Here's an exhaust manifold, and it takes the 3 of the gas flows and merges them into one pipe. So some other things of interest from this side. This is a breather for your manual transmission, just to keep it from overpressuring. This one you may not ever see very often, but buried down here in the firewall is a little knurled knob, and that is to adjust the park position of your wipers. So if your wipers are parking a little out of position, that will turn a mechanism up inside the bulkhead here and adjust the stopping point of your park of your wipers. I've got the throttle linkage mainly installed. I'm waiting to put this last vertical link in after I find out exactly how much play I need on everything. But down in there is the linkage for the accelerator, which is sandcast unit, and then the brakes are a sandcast unit. These are the early brakes. They're very distinctive. They've got this booster, vacuum booster, which looks something like off a heart lung machine from the 50s. And then there are 2 master cylinders and a master cylinder for the clutch. I won't get into it in very much detail. This is a fairly complicated mechanism, but at the end of the day, you step on one brake pedal, it moves 2 master cylinders due to a set of mechanisms in there. And then that is assisted with effort from the brake booster. Got a few electrical things just kind of hanging out here. Well, this one's not hanging out. This is the position for the starter solenoid. So this heavy cable runs all the way around the engine, and it's going to be hooked up to the battery eventually. But right now, it is it's the starter solenoid, and then the lighter gauge wiring goes up to the ignition key. This relay, which is hanging down here, will ultimately get bolted to the back of the splash shield. That's your horn relay. Battery box, about ready to receive a battery. This is where the voltage regulator is going to go. And yeah, I think that's about it. The heater box is going to go right in here. Didn't want to put it in before I shot this video. And that, in a nutshell, is your E-Type engine compartment.